Good morning, Night City! Yesterday's body count lottery rounded out to a solid and sturdy 30. But today, that's not what we're talking about. No, today I stumbled upon an article and a series of tweets where people were comparing Starfield to Cyberpunk 2077. And one of the developers for Cyberpunk 2077 actually came out to defend Starfield, saying that a lot of these criticisms are, well, fake and actively harmful. And I think it's something that we really should discuss. Now, the comparisons of Starfield to Cyberpunk 2077 aren't necessarily anything new. To be honest, I've made quite a few of those comparisons on my own channel as well as in the podcast. However, today I came across an article from Games Radar titled, "As Starfield Gets Ugly Comparisons to Cyberpunk 2077, CDPR lead says this fake criticism is actively harmful." The article reads, a Cyberpunk 2077 veteran developer says that comparisons to Starfield are actively harmful. Senior Cyberpunk 2077 developer Patrick Mills has responded to a tweet comparing Starfield to the 2020 open-world RPG from CD Projekt Red. The video in the tweets shows how players in both games swim through water, how grenades detonate, and how NPCs react to things like having weapons pointed at them. The point of the video seems to be disparaging towards Starfield, but Mills isn't having any of it. The senior developer says the comparisons like this are fake criticism and actively harmful to how audience both react to and use video games, and he hates the entire thing. To read directly from Mills' tweet, he says how times have changed. To be confirmed, this fake criticism is actively harmful in the way audiences interact with the medium, and I hate it. But it's very funny to see after how many hundreds of these videos were made to ridicule Cyberpunk 2077. The article continues by saying, in a follow-up tweet, the Cyberpunk 2077 developer points to the fact that there isn't any commentary or analysis in the video. This isn't any attempt to meaningfully compare Starfield to Cyberpunk 2077 outside of clips taken completely out of context and pitted against one another. Okay, what is up with Twitter and developers wanting to run defense for bad games? It's beyond me at this point. I want to preface this rant that I'm about to go on by saying that I was given a review copy of Starfield. I only made a couple of videos about it, and the reason why I didn't make any more was specifically because of the fact that, well, I didn't like the game, and I don't like making videos about games that I'm not in love with. I want to talk about things that I really enjoy. Now, one of the other things that I do enjoy is holding developers and publishers responsible for the things that they say and the things that they do. And coming out and saying that we're not allowed to make one-to-one comparisons of Starfield and Cyberpunk 2077 is definitely not something that I'm going to sit by and watch, because it's ridiculous to me. We don't get a better one-to-one comparison than an open-world action RPG that's a first-person shooter and an open-world action RPG that's a first-person shooter. I understand that these two games are creatively different. They have completely different artistic directions that they go in, and there's a lot of different mechanics that are also unique to those two games. But if we strip them down to their nuts and bolts, functionally, they're the same type of game. The comparisons that are being made, these one-to-one comparisons, don't need commentary because they speak for themselves. Starfield is rigid and unresponsive, where Cyberpunk 2077 is not. It's alive. It feels alive. Regardless of what other people's opinions might be about different dialogue options or how the city might react to certain things or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But when we're talking about how it's fake criticism that we're comparing things like how NPCs would respond to have weapons pointed at them, I would expect that they would run away. Why wouldn't I? Especially in an open world game. I would expect for them to freak out if something happens right in front of them. However, that's not what happens in Starfield. That takes you out of the game. That removes your ability to be immersed. I'm really having a hard time processing what's wrong with us making comparisons between these two games. And I realize that there is a ton of people that love Bethesda games and they want to run defense for that game because you just don't understand Bethesda games. And it's bullshit to me because these games used to speak to a much larger audience than they are right now. And while, yes, Starfield has experienced a great deal of success through Game Pass, it's not experiencing the same love and success that it has in the past. And that's not random. That's not just fake online criticism. That's real criticism, because there are games that we are comparing it to and going, this is outdated and it needs to change. The article continues by saying there's been a similar sentiment against comparisons between games from other developers of late. Baldur's Gate 3's developers, like game director Sven Vinke, have spent the past few months pushing back against the notion that their highly rated new RPG should be an industry standard for other games and used as a stick to berate other titles. Now, this isn't a strike against Larian Studios or Sven Vinke or Baldur's Gate 3. I think it's pretty obvious that I love that studio and I love what they've made. If you look at any of the other videos that are on my channel, but this idea that we're using games as a stick to rate other games or berate other games is ridiculous to me, because while I understand that they want to defend other developers because, well, they're all the same. They want to make great games. They want to be creative and they want to look out for each other. And that's something that I can understand. At the same time, you can't tell us how not to set a standard. If we say something is what we like, and we say, do more of this, and we're telling that to other developers, that's free criticism. That's their opportunity to take it as either constructive or something that's going to tear them down. Obviously, I know that when it's online discourse, if you're on Twitter or Reddit, things are going to get a little heavy-handed and people are going to say some downright nasty things. But that's their job to be able to discern the difference between bad and good criticism. And sometimes even within the bad criticism, there is a grain of truth. And in the comparisons of Starfield and Cyberpunk 2077, there are a million grains of truth. There are tons of grains of truth. And even comparisons of Starfield or Cyberpunk to Baldur's Gate 3 also has grains of truth, because there are similar things that these games share. And one of those things are RPG immersion. It's getting to know NPCs and how they function and how they act and how cinematic these games may feel and how great they feel or how realistic they feel to us, because the more we can relate to them, the better that gaming experience is for us. Take the criticism. Make it constructive. We're literally telling you what we want. We're telling you what we want to give you money to make. Don't make it anything more than it needs to be. And of course, the conversation doesn't end here. Actually, it goes on to continue on Twitter, where Patrick Mills responded to a game reviewer named Synth Potato, who posted saying, "As much as I like Starfield, Creation Engine needs to go. Going back to Cyberpunk puts into perspective just how outdated Starfield's dialogue animations are, and it is staggering. Regressing to a rigid camera angle that was left behind in 2006 with Oblivion and entirely eliminating body language is one of the most stunningly stupid decisions I've seen a developer make. Why regress to Oblivion? They had far better angles in Skyrim and Fallout 4. Neither had very good facial animations, but at least they didn't lock you in and remove your body language entirely like Starfield does. In the video that I have for Cyberpunk, Judy actually has restless leg syndrome and constantly shakes her leg while sitting. Dialogue like that gives NPCs life. Starfield does not have any body animations and dialogue aside from a few turns and the occasional generic hand gesture. I've really been feeling more and more critical of Starfield after going back to Cyberpunk. With constant load screens, awful dialogue camera, and lackluster animations, it really upsets me how Bethesda refuses to move on from a garbage engine that was outdated in 2015 with Fallout 4, and is an absolute joke in 2023. Object persistence is not worth losing everything else that makes modern games feel modern. This stuff was back in Cyberpunk in 2020. I really don't think with patches that Starfield can ever really match this level of quality. This is fundamentally the fault of Creation Engine." Mills responded by saying, "I like Starfield a lot, so I'm not going to get involved in the core criticism here, but I will say that the way they handled cinematics versus 2077 is not down to the engine so much as it is the tools and design. Related, but not the same." Now, I can't really speak to whether or not Synth Potato is right that it's the Creation Engine that's holding back Bethesda or holding back Starfield. But what I will say is that their criticisms are definitely something that resonates with me and resonates with a lot of other people as well, because yes, Starfield feels cold. It doesn't feel responsive. Like I said earlier, you look at a game like Cyberpunk and you can see these small little motions, this different bits of body language, these things that make the game feel real and cinematic, and it's something that players appreciate. And modern audiences, the real modern audiences, not the ones that a lot of these studios refer to, but real modern audiences are expecting modern experiences, and Baldur's Gate 3 and Cyberpunk 2077 are modern experiences. They're things that we enjoy, and if we're telling you that's what we want, of course we're going to sit back and think, well, how does Bethesda, this massive AAA company that's now backed by Microsoft, one of the biggest software companies, most richest software companies in the world, not see this trend coming? How do they not make advancements to make their games feel more cinematic? And now, what I do appreciate is that in response to this tweet, a chain of tweets from Patrick Mills arrives, and a lot of this stuff actually talks about that. But it also kind of goes to show that they might be taking online discourse a little too seriously, and they're not really paying attention to what we're actually saying. Patrick responds to his own tweet saying, caveat, I'm not an engine guy, and I only have a little experience with the creation kit. So if a programmer with that experience wants to come and correct me, you're welcome. But I don't see any reason why they couldn't do something more elaborate if they wanted to and had the tools. It's not a focus for them for a lot of reasons, and the necessarily high level of player freedom is actually as big a deal as the tools. You can't do Judy's roof thing because you can have that scene play out on 100-something different planets at any time. They do some scenes that are staged in a refined way, like meeting Constellation for the first time, some quest sequences, etc., but they have vastly more scenes with a revolving cast of characters and a mind-boggling number of possible locations. Every major scene in 2077 took literal years to make. In Starfield, I can propose to like 10 different NPCs and I can do it on any of 1,000 planets. You can't do elaborate scene design like that. You'd be making the game forever. Instead, BGS puts their resources into giving maximum levels of player freedom. They are just doing something different with their time, and that's cool. You can want their scenes to be more cinematic or whatever, and that's fair, but that comes at a cost. This is like the Baldur's Gate 3 should get DLC to be real time, or every RPG should offer gameplay and narrative agency of Baldur's Gate 3 all over again. But this time it's simply chalked up to an engine. It's ignorant, and I don't mean to say that to disparage the OP. But not every game can do everything. You can make a game that has every feature executed at the same level as the best in that field, and it has very little to do with the engine that you're using. And this is the de-evolution of online discourse, because when it comes to online discourse, people always want to hyperfixate on one specific thing that they heard or they saw or someone said, and they completely lose track of the broader general topic, because as you see, Patrick completely focuses in on the idea of the engine and how this guy is completely off-based in his criticism of Starfield or his comparisons of Starfield to Cyberpunk 2077, to the point where he actually goes and says, well, yeah, I mean, you can say that you want the game to be more cinematic or whatever. And this is the same thing as the Baldur's Gate 3 thing, where people said that they wanted there to be a real-time action DLC, or every RPG should offer similar gameplay and narrative agency like Baldur's Gate 3. Well, you could focus on those things and then call us ignorant for wanting them, or instead, you could look at it and go, wow, there's a lot of people that are really resonating with these storylines from these NPCs. There's a lot of people that really are enjoying a lot of this performance capture or this high-end voice acting or all of the player agency that Baldur's Gate 3 gives them, or a lot of the different scenes that Cyberpunk 2077 gives them. Maybe we should look into ways to be able to provide more of those experiences in the future, because that's what players want and that's what players are asking for, rather than calling us ignorant and brushing off the things that we like, rather than hyperfixating on things that don't matter because they're finer details that we don't understand, because we don't need to understand how games are made. We just need to tell you about the things that we want, and you need to listen. It's as simple as that. I want you to be creative and have the freedom to do things, but you should also at the same time be listening to the things that we want, because at the end of the day, you want us to play your game. Do you not? What are we to you if you don't want to listen to us? If you want to brush us off? If you want to get all riled up online over this ridiculous discourse like this? it's like those weird situations where it's like, women just don't understand men or something like that, when like men are like being super simple and easy to read and we just kind of tell people what we want. It's the same kind of situation, but it's the developers that are looking at the gamers and they're like, we don't know what they want. They're so hard to read. No, we're not hard to read. The problem is that you're reading into something that's not necessary for you to read into. You're not looking at the broader discourse, the greater taste of the audience, what we're asking for. What we're asking for is not Starfield. What we're asking for is Cyberpunk. We're asking for Baldur's Gate 3. And it's not that we want your games to be exactly like those games. But man, we want you guys to be near them. One of my favorite streamers said this. I want every game to be like Elden Ring. That's the standard I want to set. I want every game to be like Baldur's Gate 3 or every game to be like Elden Ring. And I don't expect you to be the same game, but I expect you to at least be on the mountain. Because if they're at the top, you should be on your way up. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends, and actually, I'm going to see you in Cyberpunk. Anyway, peace.